Well, I've just finally finished 2 books, and one of them will be a part of the Paperback Project, aka reading all the paperbacks in that central shelf there when it's full. A varied 200 plus list. It's going very slow, but I'm doing it. And after I read this play for the Paperback Project, The Effect of Gamma Rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds, and I dig it, I'm a fan. I wanted to revisit this other book, and I happen to have this awesome, 1968 copy. This is an old copy. Yeah, it's like an old paperback. The oldest hardback only sells for $10 on eBay, but this is cool to have. And for all I know, this might be an old family copy. This could have been my older siblings, which is cool. Now I'm maybe I shouldn't have penciled that up. I had made pencil markings throughout. But I really enjoyed revisiting this. It's still funny, made me laugh out loud a number of times. And I think it deserves to be on the main paperback shelf and not in the younger readers section, because it has real emotional heft. It's a real story. It just is about and in the voice of teenagers. So I think it's literature, honestly. It's a really good book. And I found myself in a conversation with my friend Ty the other day at his house, because I had just read that play. And so I mentioned Zindel, and he was like, oh, the Pigman changed my writing life. And he told me a very similar story about being a kid and encountering it and being the first work of realism that he had really encountered, and it making him think differently about life. And he had a lot of the same comments I had, but it's a good story. Look at these 60s books that have dyed edges. I love it. Love it. It's pretty. I think that was often to hide a mixed quality of papers. Let's see. So many good, great marginalia, Mike. So many good attentive details. Last line. I guess these are notes to myself for this video. That's weird. That's added a new element to my notes. Ends with a dedication. This book is very rooted in place. It's very Staten Island. I was able to look up pretty much all the locations in it and found them IRL in Staten Island. But it's epistolary, a young man and woman writing back and forth to each other. Their voices are good. The young woman's mom is very similar to Beatrice in the effects of gamma rays on Man in the Moon's Marigold, which I believe is very similar to Paul Zindel's mom. So that dude had a foundational trauma of just being raised by this person. It makes me want to read The Pigman's Legacy and The Pigman and Me, the whole hybrid trilogy. 2 fictional works and a memoir. That's so interesting. But for now, that's my 3rd book from the paperback shelf. Though I just got a great idea. I think I'm going to choose a work and read it over and over again once a month every year too, so I can get a deeper understanding of it. And I think I'm going to choose The Secret Sharer by Joseph Conrad, because if I read that once a month, I know I'll get new depths out of it. And it'll be kind of an interesting, weird discussion. And not everything should just be a superficial first-time read. And I'll start up my Dostoevsky read too. But anyway, this, because I love reading his whole oeuvre. I'm going to read his biography. And while I read his biography, I'll read all the works as we encounter them there. Yeah, this is a really interesting, kind of tragic, moving story. Apparently Zindel had a screenplay for it that never got made. And that was a disappointment to him. I mean, it's pretty tame by modern standards, but the teens are unapologetically drinking and smoking and stealing, and it came out around the same time as The Outsiders, and this one's often called the first YA novel, which is kind of interesting. I reread it partly for sentimental reasons, but partly because I'm I bet that's actually good still after reading The Effects of Gamma Rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds. A cool indie movie type story hits the spot once in a while. It's great to see the human drama unfold in all its detail, These kids are prank calling people, and they prank call and try to keep them on the phone as long as possible. And they call this lonely old guy up, and they end up hanging out with him after they con him out of $10, which I looked it up is now $90 these days. So, that's a lot of money. And then tragedy unfolds as they end up having a party at this old guy's house while he's in the hospital. And some of these kids' friends are awful, and they trash the place. And yeah, it's a sad story, but it's also like these kids just like seeing death up close and seeing, you know, real betrayal and real deep stuff, like way up close at really foundational ages. And kind of their relationship is really like well drawn too, and you kind of like want them to be together and to work it out and stuff. It's a good book. Yeah, it is literature. This is 60s literature, 1968. And it was intended for a younger audience, but I'd say that whole generational wavelength was a younger one at that time too, you know. The PIGMAN by Paul Zindel. Yeah, look what else is out in The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. Any others? And then I know. Don't play dead before you have to. Yeah, it starts with an oath. It's a bit formally experimental. There's some little things in it. It's epistolary with, you know, going back and forth. It does things like have a puzzle and then give the answer at the end of the chapter. Interesting. I felt doubly called out by this book, and it's the first pages. In the first pages, he's like kind of shown to be this juvenile delinquent that blows up toilets in the bathroom with bombs and stuff. And I remember a lot of dry ice bomb type stuff when I was a young moron in those years. But here's where I feel really called out from today. You couldn't depend on a substitute teacher to write on the blackboard, though, because usually they just told you to take a study period, so they didn't have to do any work and could just sit at the desk reading the New York Times. Oh yeah, and the book has some objectionable, outdated language in it, like retarded, and yeah, you know, it's not the most sensitive, but it is like very accurate to its time. And you know, language changes, and you gotta meet it where it's at. Usually, if you want to enjoy literature on any level, usually really not modern literature, and it's good that people are trying to think of, you know, who all might be reading their work and stuff, speaking not to just a narrow niche. Oh yeah, and the young people are left to confront the harsh reality of their lives. That does happen. But this was a good read. I'm like, I after having that conversation with my friend Ty, I got online and I was like, do other people talk about this book that way? And yeah, totally. There's like blogs devoted to it, and it really affected a number of people. So that's cool. You know what? That's a triumph of humanity right there, is what that is, because this book is a little portrait of humanity. And Paul Zindel's on my radar now, you know? Someone kind of interesting. I don't know why, but I think of Jerzy Kosinski when I think about him. Is it just because it's the same time? Totally different writing style. Everything. Maybe both kind of lightly inventive paperback works around this time. But Paul Zindel had a really wild career, from what I can gather, that was like half YA things and half plays. And his biggest play was Marigolds, as they commonly abbreviate it. And but I remember the PIGMAN being ubiquitous in 1980s school libraries and just around the reading sphere of young people. And yeah, the 60s and 70s stuck around into the 80s for sure. I mean, to some degree, every decade does. Like, I remember more Raggedy Ann and Andy stuff when I was a kid. Like, that's like a remnant from the early 1900s, from like way older relatives. Here you go. You probably want this. Okay. No, I mean, it was cool. He was like it. But it's like, you know, like a patchwork quilt doll. And, but I mean, you know, there's weird stuff like that. Like my daughter Anodyne sometimes says, I think I might be the last generation that was taught to put two spaces between after a period and between, you know, that and the next sentence. And because they don't, now computer programs correct for that. Let's see what I marked up. There's this really interesting part where, like, because this old guy has a house and sometimes leaves this young man and this young woman alone, they kind of have this chance to kind of be a family. And they're just immediately horrible. The guy's like, why should I put out the garbage when you're the one who makes it? He's immediately horrible. She's not too bad. You make just as much as I do. And it's like, that sucks. They just bring the problems of their homes to their chance to do it themselves. But then, I don't know, they don't stay there maybe. There's growth. If you're going to survive nowadays, you really have to think a bit ahead. Yes, I know. Now I realize this. Ugh. Money. Gotta get a better job. Or an additional one. Sheesh. Does anyone live in this crazy world? Old-timey phone number. This is a very funny book at times and very tragic. Boston Globe. It is. Intensely moving story of believably alienated young people. I can't believe this hasn't been turned into a movie. There's a bunch of amateur movies of it on YouTube. And that's cool. He's written 2 other novels for young people, My Darling, My Hamburger, and I Never Loved Your Mind. The author of several plays. Huh. The Laurel Leaf Library imprint of Dell. Well, here's the thing about books. They're cool. You know, glad I reread this. That's 3 down on that case. And yeah, I'm going to reread Secret Share every month all year. See what I get out of that. It's not too long. It's just like a third of this volume. I think I've heard 16,000 words. That's not too long. And this was really good. So good. That's a human life captured in a book right there. That'll give you all kinds of feels. Whoa. Yeah, I want to save it to talk about with my friend Doug, though, because I just read it. But he read it too, and if he's willing to come on the channel and talk as well, that would be cool. Because we were talking about it already, and I was like, this is lively. All right, well, take it easy, folks.